Welcome, this is King Rex. I'm coming at you with a fantasy football draft strategy guide. I decided to do this because a lot of the guides that seem to be on YouTube seem to make assumptions about your league makeup. I don't think they really are hand tailored in a way that they can work for everybody. My guide you can hand tailor to your own draft, and it should work for you in getting a really good team that should at least be able to get you into the playoffs if you follow my guide. I can't win you a league title, but I can get you to where you need to be in order to win a league title. First things to consider is the size of your league. If your league's an 8-team league, a 10, a 12, a 16, the league I'm in actually this year is an 11-team league. It was a 12-team league last year. That definitely makes a big difference in who you can expect to get in an 8-team league. There's going to be better players available to you lower in the draft, and you should actually do some mock drafts and try to figure out what players you want to target. Another thing is your roster makeup. When I say roster makeup, I mean the players you have to play on a week-to-week basis. The standard roster makeup is one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, one tight end, one flex, one kicker, and one defensive starter. Generally, flex, you can play a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end, although few people will ever put a tight end in a flex spot. So this is a basic setup. Some leagues have three wide receivers, some have two quarterbacks, some have what's called a bigger flex. I can't think of the name of it, where they can play a quarterback in their flex. If you play in a league where you can put a quarterback in your flex, pick two quarterbacks and play one in your flex. Quarterbacks score more points than any other position. The next big thing you need to know is the scoring system. This is where it really, a lot of the advice other places give doesn't fit everybody, because they already have the rankings made out of who you should be picking. Pick this guy in this round and this guy in that round. Well, depends on the scoring system you're using. If you're using PPR, well, the best wide receivers are a little rarer because the guys that catch a ton of passes, their values are inflated. If you use non-PPR, the values of wide receivers are not inflated. It actually helps the best running backs are inflated, because all those running backs that catch 3 or 4 or 5 passes a game but don't get a lot of yards, they lose those bonus points, so they're really not worth having. And half PPR kind of splits the difference. Another thing to know is your league mates. To me, one of the best parts of fantasy football is being in a league with people that you're friends with, that you know, that you spend time with beyond fantasy football. But if you're one of these people that's in a league where you don't know anyone else, it is a good idea to try to be in these same leagues year in and year out, because you can learn the tendency of your league mates, especially their drafting tendencies, which is the important thing. In the league I'm in, there's a Browns fan that tries to pick the mostly Browns players. Then he goes for people that played at Ohio State. Then he also goes for Big Ten players after that if he can't fill his roster out any other way. This year he's got Kareem Hunt, he's got Jarvis Landry, he's got the tight end Austin Hooper, and he picked the Browns defense, which I think he picked their defense last year. So he's got 4 Browns players out of 16 on his roster. That's a lot of Browns players. So you know, if you want a Browns player, you're going to be fighting with him for that guy. There's another player in my league that's a big Steelers fan. He tries to load up on Steelers players. He's got James Washington. He's got Deontay Johnson. He's got another. Ben Roethlisberger's his backup quarterback. And you could tell he was disappointed when he couldn't get James Conner. He was disappointed when he couldn't get Steelers defense. So there's a lot of Steelers players on his team. He would probably have half a dozen Steelers players if he could get everybody he wanted. There's also a guy that picks defense and kickers early. I don't think you should pick these positions early. So don't let the fact that someone grabbed one, like last year this guy grabbed the Bears defense in the 3rd round. Don't let him, even if he starts to run on defenses, let those people pick those defenses. Let them pick those kickers. Pick those player positions last. Trust me, that's a good strategy. There's also a guy that picks a quarterback in the 2nd round every year. So you know if he drafts after you in the second round and you want a particular quarterback, so you really want Mahomes, you might have to reach and grab him quicker than you'd want to because this guy might grab him. In fact, this year he did grab Mahomes. I was hoping Mahomes would make it to my third round pick. I picked 11th out of 11 players. I was hoping to grab Mahomes and Chris Carson in that position. He had Mahomes. So I grabbed David Johnson, which was my third running back, which I plan on putting in my flex. Also, is there someone that picks quarterbacks at the end of the draft every year? If you know someone that waits on certain positions and you pick close to them, and when you go around in a snake draft where you pick, so you draft 10th and then it curves around and he's in there, you know he's not going to pick a quarterback, so you can wait maybe. You know he's not going to pick that tight end that you might want to wait on. So knowing how your other league mates draft, it can help you draft because you can know which player you want to grab right away and what player you might be able to let go, especially if it's a short range to your next pick. Also remember there are a lot of people that want to have at least one player off their favorite team, or maybe there's a player they really like if you know someone's a big Aaron Rodgers fan, they might be targeting him. Also pay attention to the draft board. A lot of people will get caught up in what they're doing and not pay attention to the draft board to see what other players in their league are doing. They'll pay attention to who's coming off, but they won't pay attention to the fact that the guy that drafts right after you, that will be picking it twice before you pick again, has already picked running back. He might not pick a running back in the next two picks, or he picked 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds. So if someone's already picked a bunch of running backs, they're likely to not pick a running back right away. Someone has not picked a running back yet, you can bet they're going to be looking for one. If someone hasn't picked a running back in the first 2 rounds, you can almost guarantee that their third round pick is going to be a running back, and there's a good chance the fourth round pick will be as well. If someone went the first 4 rounds without a wide receiver, they're probably going to start grabbing wide receivers off the board. So knowing what people have on their teams already can kind of tell you what they might be looking for. So if you're sitting in a situation where there's a running back and a wide receiver you both want, and let's say you're picking 10th in a 12-team league and the 2 guys behind you both already went running back both times or something, you can think they're going to grab a receiver, I better grab that wide receiver. If one of them guys hasn't picked a running back yet, you better grab the running back and just hope the receiver's there. Another thing everyone should do, and a lot of people don't do, create a draft sheet. It's a very easy thing to do, and when you go online and look and they tell you how to create them, it sounds difficult, but it's really not difficult. So I'm going to go over that with you. First, you're going to have to be using player projections. You can make your own, which that is too difficult, but ESPN has player projections, which you can, if you're in an ESPN league, those projections can be set to match your league scoring system perfectly. Also, Fantasy Pros has player projections, but they're usually just PPR, non-PPR, and half PPR, but generally there's not much difference in scoring other than that. So use your league scoring system and create a draft sheet. The way you want to do it is that once you have projections available, you want to value players against one another. So you want to either use the last starter or the first bench player as a baseline. And the baseline setup is that if you play in a 12-team league, the last starter is the 12th quarterback and the 12th tight end. People aren't going to play those in the flex. Well, then there'd be 24 running backs, plus half of your 12 flex positions would be 30th running back and 30th wide receiver as your baseline in your league. So you set those players to where when you're giving values to players based off projections, they would be set at 0. So let's say the 12th best quarterback is set to score 290 points in your projections. You would take the projected value of a quarterback minus 290, and that would be their value when you're creating the value over replacement. And what this does, it lets you rank all players against each other, and you can use this sheet as a guide when you're picking your players. This is the top 20 on my sheet from this year with my scoring system. You get the player's name, the position, the team they play for. I put the bye week, ESPN's ranking, and Fantasy Pros, and then I averaged them. And my running back was set to score 260 points. He set to score 122 points more than the next best, than the 30th best running back. So the 30th best running back in my league set to score about 148 points. And so he ranks against these other running backs. With running back to running back, it's very easy to rank these guys. But where you get into issues is when you have a quarterback, like you have Lamar Jackson, he's set to score 77.75 points more than the number 12 quarterback. I think I put 12 or 11. Whatever I set my baseline at, I made sure it was consistent. I think I went last starter on all these positions. So it's 11th. So looking at about 375-ish points. I'm sorry, 275 for your lowest level starter in my league. So that ranks Lamar Jackson against all these running backs and other players in the league. Then Kelsey comes up high once again. Last year, I think he was even higher on my list. And so on and so forth. One thing you will notice here when you look at this value-based sheet, though, there's 20 players here. 15 of them are running backs. 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, 1 wide receiver. Michael Thomas, great wide receiver. He's almost guaranteed to be good every week. I do think there would be an issue that because Emmanuel Sanders was brought in, I think he might see some regression this year. But he's still going to probably be the number 1 wide receiver, close to it. Now, when I looked at the sheet, I drafted 11th. Everyone before Kelsey, the top players available on this sheet was Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelsey, Patrick Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Kenyon Drake, then Kittle, Carson, and Eckler were all available. The rest of those guys were drafted. If I'd have went 100% off this sheet, I'd have chosen Lamar Jackson and Travis Kelsey. These rankings I didn't come up with. These were rankings Fantasy Pro and ESPN come up with. I think they have Lamar Jackson pegged a little higher than he should be. Plus, I didn't want to go quarterback tight end. I wanted to take at least 1 running back. To me, of the guys on here that are not, and also Michael Thomas was gone, so you had 4 guys, Jackson, Kelsey, Mahomes, and Kittle, that were non-running backs. Well, my top 3 guys were non-running backs. So I just did pure value-based drafting. It would have been Jackson and Kelsey. And I wouldn't even have looked at anyone else. But I said I want a running back. So Kelsey, to me, was the safest bet. He's going to score his points. He'll probably score between 150 and 175 points with that ranking of 167. He's consistent. He's done it every year. Then I skipped over Mahomes, who actually, in my opinion, would be a better pick, and I grabbed Jacobs. Now, with Jacobs, you had Edwards-Helaire, Jacobs, Mixon, Drake, Carson, and Eckler. Well, I didn't consider Carson and Eckler to be on the level with these other ones, so I was looking at Jacobs and Mixon. To me, were the 2 most solid picks that they would be the least likely to bust. Helaire probably has the biggest upside. I think he's got the highest bust potential. And Kenyon Drake, if something happens to him, Chase Edmonds could take over. So I picked Jacobs because I figured he was the safest pick, which is the big thing. Don't pick overly risky players in the first 4 rounds. Last year in the league I was in, the guy who picked first overall finished dead last, which was 12th position. He picked Alvin Kamara first overall. Alvin Kamara, a good pick generally, but he picked him over Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and Ezekiel Elliott. With Elliott actually holding out last year, I could see taking Kamara over him, but he should never have taken him first overall. He should have went with either McCaffrey, who was rated to do just as well, or Barkley. He did pick Antonio Brown in the 2nd round. Total bust. That was the 1 week he did play. This guy didn't play Antonio Brown because he didn't think he'd have as big a role as he did, and Antonio Brown actually had a good game, but then he was immediately cut. Damian Williams was another big bust. He was expecting to be a bell cow when he was just a running back by committee, and the Chiefs seem to be using a different running back every week as the main running back. Josh Jacobs was a great pick, but he couldn't make up the lost ground with these first three guys. He finished dead last. He also busted on his quarterback because he picked Cam Newton. But I busted on my quarterback. I picked Ben Roethlisberger. The guy picked 12, so the whole entire opposite end of the draft. He finished 11th overall. He picked Le'Veon Bell. That was a risky pick. Le'Veon Bell frequently gets injured. Going into that season, I think he only ever played 16 games once. He was with the new team, and he hadn't played for an entire year. That was a lot of risk in one player to use your first-round pick on. Then he picked Baker Mayfield. This is not the Browns fan I said something about earlier, but he's another one that loves to grab Browns players. Baker Mayfield, that was way too high of a pick for him. But there's so many Browns fans because I live in Northeast Ohio. This guy might not have been able to get him in the third round. But that was way too high of a pick on Baker Mayfield. Devonta Freeman, coming back from injury, got injured again. Kind of a bust pick. That one, you can't put on him too much. But there was still some risk after all these players had some risk. And Landry was probably picked too high to be in the fourth round, kind of like Baker in the second. There was better receivers available. In fact, he picked Cooper Kupp after Landry. And so he picked his better receivers later. Person that picked 7th, dead center of the draft, finished 10th. They didn't do risky picks. They just kind of got screwed by luck. David Johnson got injured in the 7th game. Devonta Adams had some injury issues. Kerryon Johnson was put out of the season in the 7th game as well. Stephon Diggs was pretty good, although I think he might have been banged up a little at the beginning of the year. He wasn't banged up so much that would really factor in, but this person didn't have the risk that the other two had. But if you have players bust in the first 4 rounds, if you have 2 of them bust, you're going to stand no chance of making the playoffs. You can see what happened to these people. And actually, the person here didn't have another good running back to back them up. Their next best running back was James White. I finished first overall. I picked 3rd. As I said, Kamara was gone. Saquon Barkley was gone. I thought McCaffrey was the least risky because Ezekiel Elliott was holding out at the time. He ended up being the number 1 player in the league. Mike Evans was our number 3 wide receiver in the league. I picked him in the 2nd round. There's already other receivers picked ahead of him. Michael Thomas was already gone, so I couldn't get. Granted, Godwin was still available, and who would expected him to be number 2. Picked George Kittle in the 3rd round. Kelsey was gone early in the 2nd, so I didn't have a chance of him. So I got the 2nd best tight end. Then Chris Carson was my 4th round pick, which I do believe he was right around a top 12 running back. So these 4 picks are a big part of the reason why I finished first. Person that picked 9th finished 2nd. He got Todd Gurley, and the person that picked 9th, finished 2nd. He picked Todd Gurley, but Todd Gurley wasn't as risky as you think because a lot of the lower risk backs were already gone off the board. You got guys like Dalvin Cook that get injured a lot. You had Le'Veon Bell that was on a new team. So there's a slight risk with Gurley, but it wasn't kind of as bad as it is this year, I don't think. Gurley's always had some injuries, and picking him 9th overall, that probably wasn't overly risky. He got Joe Mixon, who's solid. Amari Cooper's solid. Zach Ertz is solid. So he had one guy with slight risk, and he finished 2nd overall. Guy that picked 6th, finished 3rd. I think he kind of got a little lucky. Chubb was a great pick. Thomas was a great pick. But Melvin Gordon, if he'd have held out for a long time, he would have been in major trouble, but he only held out for like 4 weeks. So he got him in the 3rd round, and when he came in, he returned good value, so that was a great pick. And Drew Brees was a great quarterback last year, too. He was actually the number 1 quarterback in the playoffs last year for our league's playoffs from week, which I think was 13, 14, and no, it was 14, 15, and 16 was our playoffs. He was the number 1 quarterback in the playoffs. And he got those. So as you can see, Not going crazy with the risk. A little risk with Gordon, a little risk with Gurley. That's how you make the playoffs. Don't go risky. Pick guys that got a high floor. When you want to go risky, you want to do that in the later rounds when you're just hoping to grab someone who might be big. If they bust, you can drop them and just grab someone else off the waiver wire. Also, load up on running backs. Even with your value-based sheet, you should realize that there will be few good running backs available on the waiver wire. The only good running backs ever come off the waiver wire are people that are put in the starting position because somebody got injured that they didn't expect them to be starters. All the best running backs will usually be gone by about the 6th or 7th or 8th round. So load up on running backs, especially if you're in non-PPR. Another thing you should do, plan on starting a running back in your flex. This is good for a few reasons. Running backs score more points on average than wide receivers. Plus, if you start a running back in your flex, when you do have a bye week, you can simply move them out of the flex and have them cover your bye weeks as well. So if you have 3 really good running backs, you probably want 4, but 3 really helps. That way you don't have to have a huge drop-off in your bye weeks that a lot of people have, because you might be able to put a 3rd player in your flex that's a wide receiver or something. Also, you're far better off having a surplus at running back than being needy. And if it comes down to it, when people start needing running backs, you demand high value for them, because if they need them, you kind of got them over a barrel. You can replace wide receivers and tight ends off of the waiver wire. There'll be a drop there, but nothing like the drop off you'll have with running backs. Have a tight end strategy going in. I think a lot of people don't even consider this position before they start drafting, and they just take whatever comes their way. You got to think, do you want to get one of those top 2 tight ends that are available? If you want Kelce or Kittle, where do you want to target them? And if you miss out, are you going after Ertz or Andrews? I think if you don't get one of these top 4 guys, just wait until you're getting toward the end of the draft, maybe around 14, 15, something like that, 13, 14, 15, 16, and grab a tight end. Another thing you could do is grab 2 tight ends low, like Jack Doyle and Blake Darwin. I think both those guys have a lot of upside. Remember, Jack Doyle plays with Phillip Rivers, and Phillip Rivers always gives lots of targets to his tight ends. Hunter Henry, when healthy, has been amazing with Phillip Rivers. And also remember that he had great years before that with his tight ends. Have a quarterback strategy. This is another one. Some people just say, well, I'll pick one late, but you got to think, do I want to spend a 2nd or 3rd round pick on Mahomes or Jackson? If not, are you willing to go for Prescott, Watson, or Wilson as your next level of quarterbacks? What about Murray and Matt Ryan? Because those are probably the next couple. To me, my strategy was basically this. I wanted to get Mahomes in the 3rd round. If he wasn't available, I was going to wait a little bit to try to grab Prescott, Watson, or Wilson. I got Prescott in the I was picking on the end, so it was the 5th, 6th round, whatever way you wanted to look at it. Didn't matter which one I picked 1st or 2nd, because no one picked between my 2 picks. But that's where I picked them. If Prescott would have been gone, I would have just waited until after the 10th round and grabbed a couple guys that I thought were high upside, like Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, Ryan Tannehill, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones. I think all those guys. If you grab 2 of those guys, the hope is that one of them just starts playing really well and they give you good value. You could probably put some other guys in there, but these are guys people aren't really going to be targeting, that you could probably get low in the draft. And if they catch on, like if Roethlisberger or Rivers return to previous form, they could be really great quarterbacks. We've seen what Tannehill could do last year. Goff's going to be throwing the ball all day long. Burrow could be good at the end of the year. Jones could be good. That's what I'm looking at. Guys that have high upside. If I'm picking at the end, 10th round on down, you're just looking at upside. That's all you're looking at. You want to fill most of your roster spots out before then and look for upside. What about wide receiver? This is the most dependent on the makeup of your league. I play in a non-PPR 2 wide receiver 1 flex league. So to me, in my league, it makes no sense to pick a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. There's going to be tons of good receivers later on in the draft. the league I play in, wide receiver is probably the most volatile position. It's the best to play matchups on. Last year at the end of the year, I had like 5 receivers, and sometimes I drop a guy and pick someone off the waiver wire. And I was literally just picking the best matchups every week at the end of the year. And when I started doing that, I ended up winning. Had a big win streak. I ended up winning like both playoff games because I had a bye because we had 16 playoff, and I won like the last 5 games of the regular season doing that. If I was in a full PPR league with 3 wide receivers, my wide receiver strategy would be totally different because you're going to want receivers that are possession receivers to catch tons of passes and they're going to be a lot harder to come by. So you're going to have to tailor this wide receiver strategy to your individual league. That's why with quarterbacks and tight ends, I give you players to think about because they're going to score the same in just about every league. But wide receivers, the scoring is so different that I can't give you names because you have to tailor it to what you have as a league. Also, when you draft them, the biggest thing to consider is what's going to be on that waiver wire. Once again, good running backs, especially non-PPR, will be extremely rare. That's why I think you should draft at least 5 or 6 running backs with your 16 picks. I picked 6. 5 would have been the minimum I would have wanted. In non-PPR leagues, deep threat receivers are comparable to possession receivers. The guy that catches 4 passes for 80 yards is going to score you as many points as the guy that catches 8 passes for 80 yards if the touchdowns are equal. Deep threat receivers, they are just as good. You're not getting the bonus from possession receivers. So always consider the waiver wire. Also, last thing, draft your defense and kicker last or pretty much at the end as much as you can. Defense is the hardest position for the experts to predict because it's very volatile. 1 year, defense will get a ton of turnovers, and the next year they won't get hardly any. Defense might get tons of sacks 1 year, and the next year they might not. You think about if teams got 2 really good defensive ends that rack up the sacks. If one of them get injured, the other guy can be double teamed, and the sacks will just dry right up. Same way with interceptions. Sometimes you have a team where they're just opportunistic. Sometimes they're not. Some teams will score a bunch of points 1 year and score touchdowns, and next year they won't score anything. So defense is the hardest position to predict because every year the best defenses are different. It's not like when you have a receiver that's going to be throwing 130 passes. He's going to have at least a certain amount of points. Kickers always generally score just about the same amount of points. The difference between the best kicker and the worst kicker in your league is probably only going to be a point or maybe 2 a game. You can easily stream both of these positions and not put high draft capital on them. If I'm in a league where there are people that pick kickers high, I definitely don't even care about picking them high. Now, if everyone in my league picked their kickers and defenses in the last 2 rounds, I could see at that point maybe going kicker in round 13 and defense in round 14, so I get the pick of the best kicker and the best defense. And just pick a couple upside players below that. But since my league, they all pick them before I do mostly, I'll take what's left. Just take a kicker on a team that has a good offense. It's going to be kicking a lot of extra points and a lot of field goals. Pick defenses. If I was picking a defense, the best thing to look at, who's got an easy schedule at the beginning of the year. They come out and play 2 or 3 easy games at the beginning of the year, that's the defense to pick because they'll probably score you more points. You don't know how a defense is going to do until you're 3 or 4 weeks in. I want to thank you for watching. You can like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I hope these draft strategy tools can really help you in winning your league this year. I won my league last year, and I didn't even have this much strategy put into it. I really feel better about the team I drafted this year. So thanks for watching, and you have a great day.